some of our earlier segments, I talked about the fact that really there weren't that many rules to container gardening, really just two. The first one being the fact that you want to use a really well-drained soil, and secondly, that the bottom of the container have a hole in it. I'm going to add a third one now, the fact that we need to really consider sun and shade. Just like these bleeding heart and these hostas really like to grow here in this ground bed that's in the shade, we also need to think about the fact that most of our plants that we grow in containers are going to be sunny plants, but some are going to be shady plants, and you really need to analyze the area where you're going to be growing that container and keep that in mind when you pick out plants. All right, so our third rule, keep that sun shade requirement in mind when you go to the garden store. Now you remember how I talked about the fact that we really need well-drained soil for containers. It gives us a good opportunity to have those roots expand, and they don't sit in water and rot, so it's really important to have well-drained soils. You know, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Unfortunately, the well-drained soils necessitate us having to add water a lot, and sometimes even on a daily basis if it's really hot. The key is, though, to know when to add the water and when to leave it alone. Here's a good example. This pot is pretty moist. As I stick my finger in here, it feels really moist, you know, and I pull it out. I'm going to leave this alone for a day or two. On the other hand, this one, on the dry, you can even tell just by looking at the soil surface. And as you stick your finger down in there, it's just as dry down in it as it is on top. So this one will need to water right away. Now, a good sign that I've done a good job of watering is that I'm going to flood it, and then I see the water coming all the way through the pot and out the bottom. In fact, 10% of the water that you apply should drain out the bottom, and that's a good sign of watering. Now, as compared with ground bed soils, container soils really don't have the ability to retain and hold nutrients, but the plants certainly need them. So we're going to need to add them on a prescribed basis. Two approaches here for us. The first one is to use an all-purpose plant food, mix it up according to label directions, and then water the plant with that. A monthly schedule for that should work out and suffice for most plants. The other approach is to use a slow-release product, much as actually you would use on your lawn, the same type of fertilizer approach. And the way this works is, again, sprinkling a predetermined amount on top of the soil, letting that soak in. And the fertilizer is released with every watering with this approach. Now, either one will work out just fine. You just kind of have to pick out which works best for you. All right, so the keys for maintaining a good container garden are, first of all, the sun and shade requirements. Second of all, a good watering schedule. And the third part is the fertilizer. On to the plants themselves. Need a little help picking those out, and that's what we'll talk about on the next garden steps.